All right, thank you all for joining us. I might be able to think of a few other ways that I'd like to be spending Valentine's Day, but there are probably very few ways that I would rather be spending Valentine's Day than with you all. So glad that you're all here. This is Chad Childs with Wichita State University's Community Engagement Institute, partner agency with the Kansas Prevention Collaborative. And we're excited about our new and improved offering of the Cultural Competence and Sustainability webinar. This is something that we offer as part of as a required training as part of the KDAD's prevention grants with the Substance Abuse Prevention Block Grant. The webinar today, like I mentioned before, but if you've joined later, will be recorded and we'll share the slides, and then we'll make the video the presentation available on the workstation later. We have 3 presenters today that have done a lot of work in preparing for today's webinar training. Crystal Dalmaso from DECA, Chris Bush from KDADS, and Austin Regier from Wichita State Community Engagement Institute. They're offering a lot of the things that we maybe in some ways understood before, but they're presenting it in a different way, and they may learn some new things, and we'll definitely learn things in a little bit of a different way. So I'm excited about this, being able to offer some of the required parts, some of the expected parts of the grant event, and I'm also excited about the adaptations and the creativity that's gone into the presentation being developed. So I'm going to be quiet now, mute my microphone, and to listen to Crystal Dalmaso, who's going to get us started. So welcome everybody, and here we go.
Good morning. Excuse me. Good morning, everybody. I'm kind of excited to share a little bit about the cultural competence part of this training. I kind of geek out a little bit over culture and identities, so bear with me. I brought some new thoughts, maybe not new to you, but just the way, like Chad said, that we're going to present them may be a little bit newer. So what we're hoping to accomplish today is just to show you a little bit about connecting cultures. I'll present a little bit of just the boring information, and then Chris is going to give us a great personal example. We'll take a quick break, personal break, and then we'll be right back for Austin's exciting sustainability piece of the training. And then, of course, don't forget to do the evaluation at the end. So just to go over the stuff that you guys already know, but we have to put it in there. We talk about the SPIF, and as I learned last week in CADCA, people think that they're spitting on each other when we say SPIF, but the Strategic Prevention Framework. And we're going to look today how cultural competence or connecting cultures really plays out in each piece of this process. Because just like the SPIF, connecting those cultures is a continuous process as well. Like I said, we're going to look at cultural competence. I'll talk a lot about connecting cultures and how cultural competence plays a piece in that. And then Austin is going to go through the sustainability piece, because these 2 pieces really should be part of every process and every plan that you're making within your community groups. You should be thinking, how will we sustain this strategy, or how will we sustain our group, and how can we really bring people of our community together? So to get started with culture, one of the things that I saw this picture and I really liked, because it really does take both sides to build a bridge. So you can't be a silo. If you're reaching out and trying to make cultural change, then you really do need everybody at the table. So today our training objectives, or in this piece, will be to kind of identify some tools that community groups can use to really culturally connect to members within your own community. So we're going to look at how self-awareness, cultural competence, cultural sensitivity, and cultural humility all are important elements to building that culturally connected coalition or community group, and really bringing those different voices to the table. So looking just like we have a process I talked about with the strategic framework, really building that culturally connected community group is a process as well. So when you're looking at these different elements, they're ongoing, they're a cycle, they're continuous, and each part makes up a culturally connected community group. When I was doing my research, I found that even the American Psychological Association views cultural competence as part of a process. So it's a great piece, but it's not an end result. So we need to continuously try to connect with community members. Each process here, each piece, each element can't exist alone. We can't just understand ourselves. We can't just have knowledge about different people or different cultures within our community. We really need to put these pieces together to truly connect each other. According to an article that I found, and I'm going to slaughter her name, so I apologize, by Judith Lando, she states that achieving a strong sense of connectedness promotes a feeling of solidarity among its community members. So this solidarity is what gets the work done. It's what changes, makes changes in our society, changes those norms and behaviors. So breaking them apart, let's look at cultural competence first. And I really wanted to take each word and really dissect what the word meant. So if you look at the word culture, it's used within this element because it incorporates human behavior. One's thoughts, actions, their customs, beliefs, values, communication. And notice none of those said race. It also incorporates race and ethnicity, but also religious affiliation and social economic group. And the list can go on and on. So many layers there. The word competence, kind of like that capacity to function, the knowledge of something, is used because it incorporates sufficient knowledge to accomplish a task. So then putting them together, here's SAMHSA's definition of cultural competence, that set of behaviors and attitudes, policies that come together in this system or in your community group, enabling you to function effectively in a diverse culture and interact among your community members and with other groups. Hey, Joy, would you mind real quick telling your story about cultures that I didn't even know were here in Kansas? I thought this was kind of interesting when Joy shared this. Is Joy on the line with us? No. Normally we have 3 or 4 Joys. Okay, we'll skip her story. Maybe she'll come on a little bit and tell us. She had great stories. I didn't realize how many different languages and cultures are out in Western Kansas. I have a lot to learn. So before then using the knowledge that we understand about being culturally competent, we really have to understand ourselves. So understanding how our identity is shaped, what influences our own cultural identity. Why should we understand ourselves? Because our cultural identity, it's really like an onion. So there's so many layers that you can peel away, so many layers that have influenced us to kind of be who we are and to make the decisions that we make just in our daily lives. So, for example, some of the things that you can see about my culture, if we weren't on a webinar, you would see that I'm a female, that I'm white. If I'm with my children, you would see that I may be a mom. Some of the things that you can't see within my layers is that I'm a daughter of a retired Air Force member. I also have a daughter who is in the Air Force. I'm the daughter of an ordained Southern Baptist preacher. I identify with people that only grew up with brothers and had no sisters in the home. I'm a mom, but I'm also a stepmom, so I can be put into those groups as well. And if you look on my Facebook page, you'll find there's so many other groups that I'm associated with. You know, I love my Chewini, so I'm in all of the dachshund and small dog groups that I can be in. I love watching those. And so those groups influence things that I do and decisions that I make, even on a daily basis when it comes down to dealing with my dog. So knowing that we are onions, that we have layers, and really trying to identify what those layers are will help us then as we are looking at others and understanding that they have layers to them, and those layers are not always seen. So that's when we need to really get into being sensitive and searching and building that relationship with others. So I attended a few different cultural competence sessions last week at CADCA just because I knew I was going to be given the webinar, and I heard cultural sensitivity defined a couple of different ways. But regardless of how you define it, it really is, if you're going to practice cultural sensitivity, then you're using skills that help you to be aware of the differences and the different cultural layers that make up those individuals. So if you're being culturally sensitive, you're using those skills and you're serving those individuals within your own environment. It's not enough just to have somebody translate the words for you. Dr. Bloomfield was saying, you really instead should strive to understand how these different cultures, how the influences from these different cultures influences daily activity. If you're doing this, then you're also trying to recognize any power dynamics or any privilege, either from your own self or for those that are within your community. And then as you work to be sensitive to others, you try and fix those power imbalances. So when I look at cultural sensitivity, I really look at trying to meet people right where they are, not bringing them to you, but really going to them and meeting them where they are to learn about them. If we jump over to cultural humility, it can be defined as an ability to maintain an interpersonal stance that is other-oriented. So here's some similarities to that sensitivity, but here in relationship to aspects of cultural identity that are most important to the other person. So if you're culturally humble, then you approach people within your community with an others attitude. And how that would look in your community group is you would look at demographics, what's within your community, and then you would ask them those that are in your community, those individuals, questions about their ideas of health and wellness, about views that they have on current issues. Maybe they view vaping differently than what you do, and maybe it just needs to be some education, but really understanding where they're at on religion and speech. Are there any communication barriers? And not just speech and language, but speech as in when you think of different age demographics, we're trying to reach young adults and speak their language, and we also have to teach them then how to speak language to older adults so that we can all communicate together. So really being humble in how you approach individuals within your community, and really trying to learn from them about them, not making assumptions, but really seeking them out and building that relationship. So really looking for their perspectives and their experiences. So all three of these, we've had self-awareness and cultural sensitivity and cultural humility, really just takes us to being culturally connected. So if we're culturally connected, we make a lifelong commitment to continuously self-evaluate our own selves. Check for any biases that are in our minds at the forefront, really do that self-evaluation and understand where we are. And that's never going to be finished. So we're not going to be completely competent at something. It's an ongoing process. We need to look at ourselves critically and really with a desire to learn about ourselves and other people. We must seek, if we're culturally connected, awareness and knowledge about other cultures within our own community. If we do that, then we can strive to fix those power imbalances so that people are more culturally connected. We seek a deeper and more sensitive understanding of other cultures when we're culturally connected, which will help us then build partnerships with others. And we do that through an other-oriented view rather than a self-oriented view. thinking about how others would approach a situation or an issue or a strategy, not just the way we would do it. So why is being culturally connected important? And I like this word picture here of just things. Again, it's a process of why we want to do something, continuously trying to evaluate and look at others. When coalition members or community groups feel safe and respected, they really are united to participate. The greater process is made within the community. So there is that respect and mutual understanding, and like we already talked about, that unity together, working to make that social change. Your participation is much higher if people are culturally connected. You'll get engagement from maybe some unusual voices and be able to bring them to the table if they feel like their voice is respected and wanted. So you work on that inclusion and equality. And remembering that when coalition members feel safe and they feel safe to participate, they feel safe to voice their ideas and their experiences, there's less surprises that kind of slow that process down and progress. There's less disruption within the coalition. And then coalition members aren't competing to get things done. Instead, they're working together. So really that conflict is lowered. So it's important. So how do we do it? Here's our SPIF process: our assessment, capacity planning, implementation, and evaluation. We do this through each part of the process, through each, I don't like to call it a step because it's a continuous and ongoing cycle. So we need to train our members about being culturally connected and the importance of it. So taking this information back to our community groups, and commit the group to this continuous cycle of learning about themselves, seeking to be sensitive and humble to others. So really, first you need to assess where your group is, and do we need to do more self-evaluation or do we need to do more community evaluation? If we're going to build capacity, if we're going to reach out and be connected to others, then the leadership of the group really should be committed to the cycle of being culturally connected, and really should be committed then to seeking out maybe some unusual voices or other cultural layers that are within your community. In the planning, you're going to include, after you've done some seeking out and some assessment, really try and seek out those that are not at the table yet. And then you're always going to evaluate what you're doing. Is it working? Is it not working? Do we have the same people here week after week, or do we need to continue? Do we need to change our strategy of how we're reaching out? Because again, you want your community group to be that diverse group, so lots of opinions and lots of experiences can be shared. You go through the coalition capacity survey, and there is a question on there that says, which sector of the coalition do you represent? And the survey says you may select more than one. So here's my challenge. If somebody is serving 6 hats, then, and you know that they're part of a youth group, they're a parent, they're also part of law enforcement and the faith-based community, and they've checked off all these boxes, you really have one person then representing many sectors. And to be truly diverse, you need to seek out multiple people for each sector. So for instance, you have that person that has your faith-based organization checked off. But if you were to research in your community, you find out that you have 6 churches and 6 different belief systems rather than just one. So you really want to have all of those faith-based organizations represented and engaged in your strategies and your processes and your decisions at the table. Do you have multiple schools within, multiple districts or multiple schools within your area that you're serving? Having just one counselor, school counselor, it's nice because the box gets checked off, but you really don't understand maybe other schools and therefore other cultures that could be represented. And you can go through all of them the same way. So using this kind of will show you some gaps, but then I challenge you to go further and getting to know those people within your community group. Are they checking off several? You may select more than one. And if they are, then maybe seeking out some other people within your community to represent those sectors as well. When you put into action a strategy that you're going to be intentional, we're going to look for the gaps. We're going to create action steps so that we can fill in those gaps. And remember, your action plans, just like even with your strategies, your steps may change, and they should change and update on a regular basis. So really trying to connect community members together will take some intention, some purposeful intention. So assess the current level of your cultural awareness. Identify and seek the understanding about both cultural groups that are at the table, like we talked about, and that are not at the table. Really try and push your mind, who's not here? If we're serving youth and they're not at our table, how do we get the youth here? And then create an action plan to get some youth at the table. Elderly, veterans like to be part of a process and help within their community. Are they at your table? And then sometimes we forget too, we're trying to get changes made and reductions in substance abuse within those young ages. But where do those young people come from? Do they come from single parent homes? Do they come from two parent homes? What does their home life look like? Because you may need some representation at the table that's not there. Just because that parent box is checked off, do you need to have some single parents there? Maybe you need to have some grandparents there because your community really does have a lot of grandparent parents. So really look for those outside the box of just checking off the stakeholder, and then put a plan into action. Of course, think about languages, age, think about time of your meetings. You need to change some of the times that you're meeting. That might be a strategy. You've seen that there's a gap here. We need to change something, and then create those steps. So create specific action steps. And remember, you want to make sure if you walk out, somebody else can pick up right where you pick up right where you are. And continuously evaluate your action plan and your action steps. And with this strategy, are we creating more gaps, or are we really filling in those gaps? So when we do this, we really need to let history kind of be our guide on this. Learning from what has happened in the past so that then we can be, like I've said before, intentional about bringing those multiple groups to the table. And that way your efforts then are not going to undermine any of your other strategies. You really are trying to bring community members together to work on social change. Building on communities' cultures will only promote the creative ideas for additional outreach, and then it's like a spiral. If you commit to reaching out and bringing these different community members to the table, they're going to bring new ideas and how to continuously then bring even more people to the table. When I was in Keka last week, I had a small window of time, and I had the privilege of wandering around the Museum of African American History and Culture with Vicki, and if you go, definitely take Vicki. She's a great tour guide. But as I turned each corner and I was walking down each hallway, I really was reminded that social change takes all people of all cultures working together. Not one group can get something done on their own. When you silo yourself out, you make smaller changes than what everybody working together on. So working together, working on different things with our different skill sets. And then we can take that large cruise ship of society and really make that small shift in the norms and behaviors. And I think Chris had some really good examples. So Chris, if you want to take it from here and share your example, I think that would be great.
All right, thanks, Crystal. Give me a moment while my PowerPoint pulls up. All right. Well, again, thank you all for being here this morning. Just to feed into a little what Crystal had already shared. So I wanted to look at it from a perspective of a personal experience or from a story perspective. And so I went back and then I started thinking, and my son, who was a freshman in college at Wichita State University, came home and started talking about some experiences that he had with moving into the Wichita State University Living Learning Center, and for short, that's LLC. And before I get started, I wanted to say that the pictures that will be shared throughout this PowerPoint came off of Google Images. So if you see some pictures, they are real pictures from Wichita State University students. So you may see someone you know on there. So I just want to make sure I share that information. So again, Crystal touched bases on a lot of the information around culture. And again, my son is a freshman majoring in aerospace engineering. And so once he got to the campus, you can see that there's just generally just the basic understanding of all the different cultures through ethnic backgrounds. But like Crystal stated, with the different layers of those individuals, and once he was there, was able to get a chance to start meeting several different people. And the way that the LLC is set up is that they have several different disciplines for their education. They have the honors hall, the engineers hall A, they have a business floor, the fine arts, women in engineering, and so forth. So those individuals are split throughout the LLC based on their education discipline, what they'll be learning. But they also have an opportunity where they're integrated throughout their time living in the Living Learning Center, and an opportunity to be able to get a chance to work with each other, to get to learn about each other, and just the different disciplines and educational paths that everyone is taking. Once Christopher got pretty much situated in the program where he's planning on majoring in, so he found out that individuals have different ways or practices of doing different things, and for the sake of this, for the sake of time, I just spend more time on the aerospace engineering program. But he found out, even through the aerospace engineering program, that first, that they all live on one floor, which is the engineers, and it can be broken down through biological and agricultural engineers, the biomedical engineers, the ceramic science engineers, chemical engineering, civil engineering, and so forth. So he came back and he said that we all have a practice and a habit of how we study. But he said what he found out was that each of those disciplines have a different way of going about how they study. And that gave me an opportunity to be able to explain to him it's just their way of their culture of how they're doing their practicing through studying. So he even found out, not only just from that breakdown of those engineers that I pretty much shared, that the biomedicals, the chemical civil engineers, but even within his own engineering group of the aerospace engineers, that it still breaks down to individuals who are specifically focused on aerodynamics, propulsion, the structure, that when they broke down to their study groups, that they had a different way of going about studying. And he found that some individuals had more of a relaxed type environment through their studying. Some individuals brought in food, some individuals strictly about the business, and some individuals or some groups also had it where you study alone and you bring something to the table before you come to the study group. So this allowed him to be able to see that getting an opportunity to learn about individuals from a different perspective, even though that they're all amongst one one group, that it can continue to drill down, kind of like what Crystal talked about, that layer of individuals. And I just thought that it was really important that not only him being educated about the aerospace engineering path of how that they did their studying practices, but also being sensitive and having an understanding that if I'm invited to study amongst all the engineers, what is their practice? What is their method? What should I know? What should I expect? Or what are they expecting of me if I'm invited to their study work group? So this is the story that I wanted to share and see, show how it can connect to just culture as we understand it and get to learn and continue to move through the process of being integrated amongst one another's in this capacity. The last thing I want to share is the slide where it talks about most of our important lessons about life have come from recognizing how others from different cultures view things. So that is really important as well. And I'll share a personal story of my own after I begin putting these slides together. And as I come to a close, I want you to think about times where you may have been in an environment or may have not noticed, but you can reflect back on how could you have been drilled down or pulled back the layers of the different cultures that you have been a part of. Just recently, I was a groom in a traditional Catholic wedding. And for me, that was something totally different. I have heard about it, how different the culture of how wedding takes place with the traditional Catholic wedding. So it was an experience, but what I took from that experience was not just the information that was being provided, but I took the opportunity to ask questions. So sometimes we get the information, but we won't learn enough unless you ask the questions. So again, from the day that I attended, or the day that we showed up for the rehearsal, the experience was just different from that day forth, just the expectations and what was asked of us, and the carrying on from the next day from being involved in the wedding. So this is the story that I wanted to share with you all. And again, I just ask that you all just go back and reflect on some areas or some places you may have been, where you can look back and see how could you have probably drilled down more into a cultural environment and still be able to open up and learn about the other cultures as well. And then the last thing that I would share is that I was watching a show about a couple of weeks ago, and some individuals had traveled out of the country, and I thought this was pretty interesting. They hired a cultural like chaperone or tour guide individual, and the reason for that was one individual had traveled outside the country prior and found out there were things that she was doing not out of disrespect, but just because this individual just didn't know, and was often reminded by the individuals who lived in that environment to explain to them this is how our culture do things. So I just thought that was very interesting. And so if there's a time for us, and even when we're traveling within our own community, that sometimes you might want to just be able to ask someone from that community, or what is the expectations, or is this something that you all are okay with? So again, thank you all for listening, and I hope this little bit of information helped you. And I'll turn it over to Chad before we go to break.
Thanks, Chris. We will, at this time, and you're welcome to stay online and stay connected and continue asking questions in the chat, or talking. If you need to open your mics, you can do that too. But we're going to take about a 5-minute break and start back up at 10:40. We'll start back at 10:40 with Austin Regier talking to us a little bit about sustainability. So 5-minute break, 10:40. Stretch, get a drink, let the dogs out, whatever you need to do.
Who delivered this? Bear Creek? From Bear Creek.
Yeah.
I was gonna buy her.
Isn't that it? Yeah.
Well, I was gonna buy her strawberry.
Crystal, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Hey, sorry about that. My computer completely froze. I couldn't unmute. I couldn't chat. I couldn't do anything. So I had to go out and come back in. So
No worries. I see how you left me hanging.
I know it. I didn't do it on purpose. I was clicking and I was trying to text or talk on the chat, and it's like nothing's working. But I was listening. You did a good job.
No worries. You can tell your story. We'll do another meeting. You can tell your story.
Yeah, exactly. I always have stories, you know. Is that you playing the music and singing, Crystal?
No, I think that's Chad. I was muted.
Oh, okay.
Okay, welcome back everybody. It's 10:39, so maybe just a few seconds before 10:40, but hope that you're all still around, and we're going to get started back up again with the next section of today's webinar, which will be sustainability, presented by Austin Regier. Austin?
Hey all. In this last section, hopefully we will define sustainability and what sustainable coalitions look like. Hopefully we'll make you care a little bit more about sustainability, or at least re-energize you to think more about sustainability. And lastly, we'll hopefully give you some strategies to achieve sustainability. So this is SAMHSA's definition, and basically it's about maintaining positive outcomes and affecting long-term change. And the example I like to give is the Lorax, right? It's great if you are having success now, if you're doing good things now, but if that compromises what you do in the future, then what's that really worth? And a lot of the thought around sustainability comes from environmental protection, the field of environmental protection. So here are some definitions that are well respected and well used within that field. The EPA says that to pursue sustainability is to create and maintain the conditions under which we can exist in productive harmony to support the present and the future. And then sustainability, which is a global organization that works with sustainability regarding overpopulation, they say simply that sustainability is the capacity to endure. And then the UN and UCLA both have sort of similar definitions talking about how sustainability needs to meet the needs of the present without compromising needs in the future. So really just this dichotomy of what we're doing now and what we're doing in the future. So why you should care at all? First of all, it's part of your funding requirements, so you have to do it. But also, I think that if you care about your work at all outside of the money that you make, then it's a question of morality. And hopefully you care about your work outside of the money that you make, because I don't think anybody's getting rich in this industry. So if you're willing to go a little bit bigger picture with me, I would say, our children, our communities, our families, they're all going to exist outside of our work and outside of our lives. And so if we believe in the change that we're trying to make now, then I think that needs to be sustainable change and change that lasts beyond us. And then the third thing I would mention on why you should care is that it's research-based. So it's been shown to do a lot of good things. We'll provide these resources for you, so we don't have to get into that now. So what do sustainable coalitions look like? I would say one of the biggest parts of a sustainable coalition is that they've diversified their resources. So part of this is funding. A good rule of thumb is that no more than 50% of your funding should come from a single source, which is probably a really scary thought for a lot of us, since a lot of us are maybe funded by one grant or one funding source. And yeah, a lot of the talk around sustainability would say that we do need to adhere to more diversification of funds. The second way to diversify resources would be people. So we have a lot of really good people on our teams, like Mindy, and like you guys are all really great people too. And for some of us, our coalitions count on one or two people that have strong voices and really get things done. And if we are to leave or something would happen to us, then what happens to our coalition? So I think that we need to diversify the people who are involved and who have a voice in our coalitions, which I think also ties into cultural humility as well. And then as far as other resources to diversify, I would say these are things like, are you hosted by a church or something that they let you use their building, or some organization lets you use their copier or printer? So thinking sort of worst case scenario, if this resource, if X resource was eliminated, how would that affect our coalition? And then another way to achieve sustainability would be through bylaws. So bylaws are boring and cumbersome, and they might not always seem that useful. And then if there's a transition in our organization, or if we have turnover in personnel, then bylaws become really important in being able to transfer skills and knowledge. So sort of like funding, I would push for you guys to look into writing bylaws and look into diversifying funding, which might not sound that fun. And then processing continuously is another important part to sustainability. And if I asked you how you would do this, hopefully some of you guys are shouting at your computer, spiff, spiff, spiff. And I think it really is important to look at your strategic plan continuously and assess your community. One quote that I really like about this says that sustainability comes through diligent consideration of sustainability. So sort of meta, but I think it's a good thought. And then sort of tying into funding, you want to have a shared vision and mission. So a lot of times we form our coalitions because there's a single funding source that comes in that creates jobs, and we can gather around that funding source. But if people don't really understand what our true mission is or true vision is, and if we don't work to help people understand that and understand that ourselves, then a lot of times our sole goal is related to the financial resources, and we're maybe not always that sustainable. My mission and vision is to have a pig like this someday. And so now we're going to switch into strategies of Chad's laughing at me. Now we're going to switch into strategies of how to achieve sustainability. So these things might seem kind of simple, and hopefully at the very least you'll take them as reminders of pretty easy tasks that we can do to work towards being sustainable. So the first one is asking for help, and I think there's a lot of power in asking for help, and I don't think that we do that very often. So one sort of fable is the kid in the sandbox who there's a big boulder in the sandbox, and he really wants to get it out of there so he has more space to play. So he's digging this boulder out, and he lifts it out of the hole, and he rolls it to the edge of the sandbox, to the lip of the sandbox, and he can't get it over this edge, and he's struggling as hard as he can to get it over. And this whole time his dad's watching from the window inside their house. And finally this little boy gives up and runs in crying and says, yeah, like, Dad, I just can't get this rock out of the sandbox. And his dad says, well, did you use all the strength that you had? And the little boy says, yeah, like I used all my strength. And right, the point being, the dad says to his son, well, you didn't ask me to help you. And I think that points to a relatable issue with coalitions, that sometimes we just haven't asked for help, and we just assume that there aren't other strengths out there that we can use. I think if we ask for help, we'd be surprised at the people who are willing to help us. Another sort of story around asking for help is the Benjamin Franklin effect. So the story behind this is that Benjamin Franklin had some dude that really didn't like him, and didn't agree with any of his political views, sort of a thorn in his side. And one day Benjamin Franklin approaches this guy and says, hey, I hear you have this book that not many people have right now, and I'm really wanting to read this book. Can you lend it to me? And the guy says, yeah, sure, I guess. And from then on, they were friends. And research has supported this too, that when we ask for help, it creates connections and creates familiarity. There's a study where they awarded people money, and then they have researchers go out to these people's houses, knock on their door, and tell them, hey, like, our department is just really running out of funding. Can you give us this money back? And so they asked like a third of the group to give money back, and another third, to not give the money back. And then they did an evaluation afterwards, and the third that was asked to give the money back, they actually enjoyed the study more than the people who got to keep the money. So I think, again, just points to the power of asking for help. And Amanda Palmer and Steve Jobs both have videos out here that I'll provide links to after the webinar that sort of talk about the power of asking for help and how it's affected their lives. And then the next big thing I would say that we need to do is that we need to pursue high community visibility and involvement. And so, right, like we just need to become known in our communities, which is, probably obvious to a lot of you and something that you're all working on. Just a reminder that I would say it's good to come at this from a strengths perspective, just like the Dwight Schrute, Jim from Muscles, does. Looking at the strengths in our community and trying to highlight those. And a good way to do this is by giving awards out. And like, that might seem silly and trivial, and I think that people actually do like receiving awards. I don't think anyone's going to get upset with you if you give them an award. And I think that sort of aligns with the strengths perspective. And then the last strategy I would offer is that it's an investment. So it might be kind of cruddy now, but what is the long-term reward for it? So some examples of this I would say are training staff. Like, training staff takes money and it takes time, it takes energy, and in the long term I would say that there's a good payback from most training. Same with building relationships with funders or potential funders. So I would say even something as simple as calling a potential funder in your community today and saying, hey, I represent this coalition, this organization. We really appreciate the work you do. Happy Valentine's Day. Hang up, takes 20 seconds, and even something simple like that can help build relationships. This is a meme about investment. And then there would be some other strategies listed by other people. So here's 7 habits of highly sustainable coalitions, and we'll provide all of this information to you later. So I'm going to kind of fly through it. Here's Santa's 6 steps of sustainability, and then here's an action plan that you can fill out for your community. Here's a filled out version of that action plan, if that's helpful for you. And then these are the resources and references that I used. And again, we'll send all this information out after the webinar. So with that, I will turn it back over to Chad.
Thanks, Austin. Okay, so we were scheduled to go an hour and a half, but we're going to give you a gift on Valentine's Day and end a little bit early, so that you can get back to work, and especially because your work does involve caring for others, and so we want to make sure that we give you more time to do that today when we can. So I'm going to paste the link for the evaluation for today's webinar in the chat log. So you can copy that, you can click on that, you can copy and paste it in your browser and use it. It looks like, I think it showed up. Yep, there it is. Okay, so you have the link there. You can go ahead and go to the evaluation survey online and complete it and let us know what you liked, what you didn't like about today. But before you do leave, we're going to keep the line open, keep the GoToMeeting link open for conversation. So we'd really like to welcome your questions. If you have any questions for our presenters today, or if you have any questions about your grant project, your KDAS project, we've got a lot of resources here. So in terms of sustainability, there are over 25 representatives from Kansas Prevention Coalitions on the line still, and there are a handful of KPC partners, staff, and some representatives from KDADS as well, including our fearless leader, Mindy Barnett. So yeah, as she said, ask away.
Hey, Chad. Hey, Chad.
Yes.
Celine had a question about outside of school partnerships. What specific kinds of partnerships do you do? Do you want to flip it back over to the sector slide, coalition capacity slide, and then maybe some other coalition members, community group members can share what other partnerships they bring to the table?
Yeah, definitely. Let me know if you see it.
Up one more.
Okay.
Oh yeah, number 15.
Okay. Yeah, and I didn't realize before, Crystal, I'm glad that you spoke. I was still muted on my end, but I did see that question from Celine, and I just was mentioning that we still have around 20, 25 representatives from different coalitions, Kansas Prevention Coalitions on the line, and then a handful of KPC staff and KDADS leaders as well. So please do feel free to ask your questions. And does somebody want to respond a little bit to Celine's question about other partnerships that coalitions have? There are some, the coalition makeup is different from community to community, Celine. So there are some coalitions that do have really strong collaborative relationships with schools and school districts. There are others where they may have more involvement from businesses. There are some that have more of a court or corrective or corrections focus. So there are definitely examples of different types of partnerships that are stronger at times on coalitions. Your question that you posted now for anybody listening on the phone, we know about the types of coalitions, but what would be some specific campaigns or partnerships that you do with businesses? Does someone have an example that you'd like to share in response to that question?
What was the question again, Chad?
The question is, so we know about types of coalitions and types of sectors, but what would be some specific campaigns or partnerships that you do with businesses?
So Paige responded and what they're doing, and then I know other coalitions also partner with pharmacies to get the drop boxes within the pharmacy. So that's one partnership outside of with a local pharmacy, local business here in Wichita.
Yeah, Paige, do you mind talking a little bit about opening your mic and talking a little bit about the work that you're doing with local banks?
Hi. Sure. And actually, I was thinking because we're also partnering with WSU Hayesville for a project.
Yeah.
And in addition, our homeless assistance groups in town, we're partnering with them. The one we're doing for with the banks is a health and alternative activity project, which is just a walking competition, or a steps competition we do in April of each year. And we just started reaching out. We started it last year. It was a huge success, and it did cost more than we had anticipated. And so we went through the year talking with groups in town to see if they were interested in getting on board. We have one of our banks who has approached us for several years saying they really want to help support events and programs with our mission. And so I contacted them about helping us to sponsor this project. It's called 060 Walks, and they were very excited. And so it was a partnership. They get to share in the assistance of, increasing well-being in the community, and they help us to finance the project itself. So it's kind of a win-win.
Yeah, that's a great example, Paige. Thanks for sharing that. And I don't know concretely to be able to talk about this, but most banks do have some sort of funding stream that they have an expectation to contribute to their community. And so the banks have some funds set aside in their budget to be able to offer to community activities, community support, to help with community development and health and wellness and things like that. So that would be one example where coalitions can go to local banks and find out if they do have some of those funds available and what the process might be for inviting them to contribute to coalition efforts.
Oh, that's my clock. Sorry.
Chad?
Yeah.
This is Joy. Another way some of the coalitions work with businesses is the sticker shock with the liquor stores.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Joy, or does somebody have an example that you'd like to share from your own coalition?
Hopefully somebody from another coalition will tell how it worked in theirs. I know there's some on here that have done that before.
Hi, are you there? This is Paige again.
Yep.
Just for our sticker shock, ours is a little bit different than what is set out in the outlined plan, in that our schools, our high school principal was not comfortable having students involved in the process, or actually being inside the physical liquor stores. And so we actually recruit I don't know how to say, local celebrities to help us do it. We have assistance from the superintendent, we have the police chief, We have one of our our state representatives. We always try to get somebody from our city council, that type of thing. Sometimes we can get a county commissioner. Anyway, so we just build a small group of local celebrities to do that in the partnership and go around. And the bank or the businesses and the liquor stores, they really seem to enjoy it.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Paige. Celine, does that answer your question in part? Thanks, Vicki. Have a good day. Okay, thank you, Celine. The other thing that you could look at doing, Celine, is there are maybe commonly referred to as local liquor tax funds, but there's a alcohol sales tax that city and county governments have some responsibility for overseeing, and those funds can go to health and wellness and substance abuse prevention and treatment sort of activities. And so that's something that if you haven't explored that as another option for sustainability, it might be worth asking some questions and talking to city and county government officials and learn a little bit more about how your community uses those alcohol sales tax dollars, and if there'd be an opportunity for those funds to support prevention coalitions and their work too. Awesome. Has anyone still on the line had a good partnership with a local hospital or healthcare clinic or anything like that that you'd like to talk about? Yeah, it makes sense, doesn't it, Celine? I don't know if Corey is still online. Corey Boyd from Sumner County. Looks like she may not be, but Sumner County is one example that I know of from a Kansas Prevention Coalition where part of their early days, they were hosted by the regional medical center, the regional hospital for their meetings, and had some good strong leadership from it may have been the CEO or executive director at the regional hospital. So I have seen that done before. The hospital didn't necessarily, that I know of, didn't dedicate a lot of funding support to the coalition, but they may have. But I know that they offered space, they offered some coordination of the meetings, and they took an interest, which was really good to see and good for that. I think good for that coalition to start to expand some credibility and some awareness of their efforts. So, Glenn, you may talk to somebody at Sumner County and see if my memory is correct or incorrect, and maybe see if they've still stayed engaged with healthcare professionals in the community.
Chad?
Yeah.
I know in Pratt, even though they're not funded, but they host their coalition meetings at the hospital.
Yeah.
The CEO of the hospital actually attends those meetings, and when it came to their attention how high the opioid prescription rate was in Pratt,
Yeah.
she actually sat down with all of the doctors and explained that what a bad situation it was, and they are really doing a fine job of reducing some of the prescriptions they're writing.
Good. Yeah, that's a good example. Thanks, Joy. Any other recommendations or questions for the group? Thank you, Paige. All right, we will wrap things up unless a question comes through audio or chat here in the next few seconds, but do appreciate you all spending your time, dedicating your time to learn a little bit more about cultural competence and sustainability and possible ways to include those foundational factors and continuous parts of the strategic prevention framework in your prevention grant efforts. So thanks for joining us. We will share the slides on the workstation and share the video recording of the webinar in case you want to review it later with others in your community, share it with your coalition. That would be a good option to do. And please, as always, feel free to ask questions and get some support if there's something that you didn't understand or weren't sure that you heard correctly. Help is here if you want it. And we will end today's webinar. And again, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Austin, Chris, and Crystal. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Chad. Have a good day.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys.